Yes. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Mike's MMA Picks here with your Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show brought to you by BetDSI as well as MMA Oddsbreaker. We are here for UFC Vegas 30, where we have Ciryl Gane taking on Alexander Volkov. Surprisingly, 9 of 13 fights on this card are expected to finish. We've got some closely lined fights. We have a women's fight where the largest favorite on the card is a action-packed women's fight. First fight of the night, though, let's get things kicked off where we have Medeiros, a Hawaiian banger with some chin issues. Over the time, that chin has been cracked a few months away from the game here. We had a fight that was rebooked after COVID. Medeiros, 15-7 record. Starting to get up there in age, mid-30s. DraftKings price of $7,700, taking on Damir Hadzovic. Hadzovic coming in with a 13-6 record. DraftKings price of $8,500 and slight favorite here. Now, couple of things. Medeiros does have a significant reach advantage here. This fight's taking place inside of a smaller octagon where we have less room to work. I believe a firefight is going to ensue quickly. One of these fighters is going to catch the other. I don't see this one going the distance. In fact, you look at the line on this fight to not go the distance, sitting at -130. Hadzovic, more durable fighter, really was asking for a war against Renato Moicano in his last bout, but did not get it, was taken down and subsequently out-grappled and submitted. I don't see Medeiros getting the job done that way. Medeiros could come through with a TKO victory, but I'll be picking Hadzovic. And I think he gets this done inside the distance. Next up, we've got Charles Rosa taking on Justin Jaynes. Justin Jaynes has gained some notoriety over the past 24 hours where he's gone all in. One thing to bet on yourself, but it's another thing to go all in. Justin Jaynes, 16-7 record, +140 underdog with a DraftKings price of $7,600. And he's taking on a well-rounded Charles Rosa. Charles Rosa was out-grappled, blown out of the water from a grappling perspective against Bryce Mitchell. We don't necessarily have to worry about that in this spot. Justin Jaynes does have a wrestling background, but he's going to look to come in here and try to land an overhand punch, where we have Rosa, who has a little of a karate background, but then also has legitimate Brazilian jiu-jitsu, spent time at American Top Team, has since moved to Sanford MMA. Charles Rosa, interesting fighter, ragdolled by Bermudez. Burgos was lighting him up at times. Smart fighter, though. I think in this spot, Justin Jaynes, we've seen him. It's an interesting spot. When you have money against Justin Jaynes, you always have to worry about that big punching power. And he throws caution to the wind. He has a block head on him. Interesting spot here. Justin Jaynes looked in great shape. Devontae Smith turned his lights out. I don't see Charles Rosa being able to do that on the feet here. I think Justin Jaynes is going to keep coming forward inside of the smaller octagon. And I actually am going to pick the underdog in this spot to get the job done. I think that the longer this fight goes, Jaynes is the stronger fighter, though Rosa has much, much better technique. And there are some times where will beats skill, and I think that this is going to be one of them. But I do not recommend going all in. Justin Jaynes, it's interesting. You listen to his quotes about his plan. He said, I don't care, I'll go broke again. That's disturbing to have that mentality, but I understand betting on yourself and putting all your chips in the basket. That's a dangerous proposition. They say scared money don't make money. I would not recommend going all in on Justin Jaynes, but I'll be picking him to win. Next up, where we have Julia Avila, who is a fighter who was without a camp for some time. Briefly went over to Glory with James Krause, and then been bouncing around. Minus 375 favorite. Highest line on the card. Second to highest DraftKings price at 9,300. Taking on Julia Stoliarenko. Stoliarenko is a grappler by trade, a submission artist. 9-4-1 record. Big underdog here, plus 275 dog, 6,900 in DraftKings. Avila is a bit of a tornado. When you watch her fight, she's a tornado of activity. She's strong. I like to see that volume. Got out-grappled against Eubanks. Disturbing to watch that. In this spot, Stoliarenko, she doesn't have the volume to keep up with Avila. That's going to put her behind the 8 ball here. And Avila is the stronger fighter. I understand her being lined as a favorite. I don't necessarily agree with her being a 4-1 favorite, though. I'll be picking Avila to win this fight and could see her overwhelming Stoliarenko and getting this done in the distance. This might, inside the distance, this could be a solid DraftKings play. Somebody who's $100 less than Moicano and has the potential to finish. In fact, this fight's expected to go to a decision at minus 135. It wouldn't surprise me to see Avila finish this fight. The low-level women's MMA, a lot of volatility, as we saw last week with O'Neal coming through. Be picking Avila here. Let's continue up this card, my friends. It is fight morning. Where we have Warlley Alves, Brazilian kickboxer with a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 14-4 record, minus 230 at the betting window. I do think that line could be a little wide here. Taking on Jeremiah Wells, 8-2-1 overall record. You may be familiar with Jeremiah Wells from his time in the CFFC, where he's had a mixed bag of submissions and knockouts. He puts on a frenetic pace, comes forward, brings the fights to his opponents. Plus 190 underdog. DraftKings price of $7,000. This fight takes place at welterweight, though. You have to understand that Wells is coming in here on extremely short notice, and he is an action fighter. Alves can be an action fighter. Alves has a tendency to gas in some of his bouts. Man, this fight, you never know what you're going to get out of Warlley Alves. Comes in there and takes out the hyped fighter Lazez. James Krause did a number on him. Randy Brown also posed some problems. Alves, I like his striking. I like how he's defensively sound on the feet, though his gas tank is a question. And Wells is coming in on short notice, hungry fighter, heavy puncher, can put some combinations together. Interesting spot here. I'll be picking Alves to win, though. This is one of those cases where Alves hasn't had a tremendous amount of time to prepare for this opponent, and Wells is in an advantageous spot because he doesn't have an opponent who is ready for him, and unpredictability can be used as a weapon. We saw that with the Frivola fight, McKinney. I'll be picking Alves to win, but Wells is a live dog here. We've got Daniel Edwards. Good morning, sir. Parlaying 3 unders. Okay. You may be onto something there. I think there are a few spots here that are available to us. Last week's card was okay in retrospect. Interesting card last week. Let's get back into business here, where we have a Michel Prazeres Trator with a 26-3 overall record. Prazeres has made a living off of beating fighters who he has a tremendous size advantage over, and this is not going to be one of those cases where he takes on Shavkat Rakhmonov. We cashed on Shavkat Rakhmonov last time out when he disposed of Alex Oliveira in dramatic fashion, getting that submission victory. Rakhmonov is a finisher by trade. He's going to need to make the most of the distance game here, and Prazeres is going to come forward looking to put Rakhmonov on his back and control him. That may happen. That may happen early and often. Rakhmonov, I have concerns about the unblemished record, 13-0. Rakhmonov getting a lot of love out there in the MMA Twitter and betting community. Interesting spot. Prazeres coming off of the USADA suspension. Also, 39 years of age, having the knee surgery. You watched the Mads Burnell fight against Michel Prazeres. You watched the Des Green fight. There are so many others throughout the career of Michel Prazeres. He's a tank. He really is a tractor out there. One of my most despised fighters on the roster, always looking to gain a competitive edge and be a weasel. Now that we've got confirmation that he's been using PEDs, that is an issue. This fight, I do not see going the distance. Rakhmonov has the striking, and I'm not going to say he locks up a submission here against Prazeres, but I think he could potentially knock out Prazeres and get a TKO victory. But Prazeres is dangerous, and he's dangerous early. I'll be picking Rakhmonov, but I'm not totally counting Prazeres out, and I think that this line is a little wide. You look at the size advantage on the scales. My gosh, Rakhmonov is towering over Prazeres. Good morning, Brick. Good to see you, sir. Appreciate you as well. Thank you for tuning in, sir. Let's continue up this card where we have a grappler, one of Damian Maia's students, taking on Kennedy Nzechukwu. Nzechukwu, 8-1 record, fighting out of Fortis MMA. He looks tremendously green out there. Kennedy does. Marques, last time out, We saw the levels of ground game, especially when you watch the Rodriguez fight, the way he was cutting through Rodriguez's guard like a hot knife through butter and locked up that rear naked choke. He's going to have to shoot for takedowns here. Marques does not have an adequate stand-up game to keep up with Kennedy. Kennedy has a massive reach advantage in this fight. Interesting spot here. I think there is some value, or there was some value on Marques when he was more of a significant underdog. I think Marques gets this done. I think that the greenness of Nzechukwu is still an issue. You watch, Saif was trying to communicate with his student, with his fighter, and was having somebody out there who was not listening, and that is incredibly frustrating as a teacher and as a professor. Marques, King's MMA. I think we're going to see Marques come out here and potentially lock up a submission against this green fighter who is making strides behind the scenes. You saw last fight out. Goodness gracious. Last time out against Ulberg, he was shelling up and was within seconds of getting stopped. Granted came through, and we saw that he does have solid cardio. So, but give me Marques. I think Marques is a sneaky play here and may get this done by submission. Let's see what else we got here. Let's continue on throughout this card where we have the return of Renato Moicano coming off of a fight against Rafael Fiziev, where he was stopped via strikes. 14-4-1 record. Is going to be at a reach disadvantage here against a Jai Herbert who spent time on the regional scene over in Europe, came over, took on Francisco Trinaldo, was dropped midway through that fight, was having success early, but then was dropped with a shot to the forehead and put out. Took about a year off, and now taking on Moicano, who is the much more well-rounded fighter here, a fighter who has multiple paths to victory. Jai Herbert, you don't see many decision wins on his record because he's knocking people out. He's going to be looking for a knockout here against a Moicano who appeared to be in decent shape, as he always is, coming in at 156 pounds in this fight, training out of ATT. Herbert out of Renegade. Here's the thing. There are levels to this game, and Herbert on the ground has not shown me that he is a threat. And also, you watched the Trinaldo fight. There was a guillotine locked up early in that spot. I think there are other fighters who could have finished that. And then we'd be probably looking at a -300, -400 line on Moicano here. Moicano has taken losses to some of the best fighters in the division. His striking defense is really interesting because he's survived and dominated Jeremy Stevens. He's dominated Calvin Kattar. This spot, I think we're going to see a fighter come out and showcase what he's capable of. He's got to take this fight. Well, I'm not going to say he doesn't have to take this fight, but the path of victory that provides resistance is on the ground. And that is where Moicano should take this fight. But he could come out here and win a decision. I don't see this one going the distance, though. I think Moicano is live for the submission. I also think that he could potentially knock Jai Herbert out. Jai Herbert is a power puncher. He doesn't have a lot of room to work inside of the smaller octagon, and Moicano has cat-like reflexes out there. He's just got to really be cautious when it comes to his striking defense and not leave himself open to get countered and KO'd, because we've seen that happen in the past. But this is a major step down in competition. I'll be picking Renato Moicano in that spot. And I see him doing that, getting the job done inside the distance. Next up, we have a really fascinating bout between Nicholas Dalby against Tim Means. This fight was put together on relatively short notice. Tim Means, though, was bumped from a card and was given a week to prepare for this matchup. Dalby coming in 19-3-1 record. We saw Dalby get his lights put out against Jesse Ronson, and Tim Means is a heavy puncher. Sometimes he can put things together and use his boxing. He's got some of the most crisp boxing out there. Another thing about Means, though, he can change gears. The Ricky Rainey fight, that was my biggest play that I've ever made on a fighter, Tim Means versus Ricky Rainey. But you watch Means, if he wants to, he can use his wrestling. Dalby looks in great shape, is a grimy seasoned vet. Tim Means he's showed us some cracks in his armor over the past 3 or 4 years. The Nico Price fight comes to mind. That was a fight where he was dominating early, piecing Nico Price up, and then got caught and got his lights put out. Nicholas Dalby is a dangerous fighter, though. I'm leaning towards Tim Means in this spot. I think that he has a few angles here, and I think that he's going to use his angles in the striking department to stay at range, get his kicks going, possibly use his wrestling going. He's got to watch out, though, because Dalby has a tendency to not go away and be there late in fights. I think that in this spot, minus 135 is a fair price to pay for Tim Means. I'll be picking him to win. Next up, where we have Andre Fili taking on Daniel Pineda. Daniel Pineda is a finisher by trade, especially when it comes to winning fights. Pineda, look at his record. He has a 27-14 record. He, like I said, finisher by trade, has a grappling advantage here, was the smaller fighter, looked in phenomenal shape on the scales. So things have changed. He spent time at the Performance Institute taking on Andre Fili, who outlasts opponents, is tough as nails. Against Bryce Mitchell, was smoked from a grappling perspective. We cashed on Bryce Mitchell against Andre Fili last time out. The Jourdain fight, was able to run away with the victory there. But we've seen Andre Fili in some wars. The Michael Johnson fight, the Dennis Bermudez fight. There have been others where Andre Fili keeps himself in the fight. And Pineda, the problem with him is he has never won a fight via decision. I've made that clear on Twitter. I don't see that happening in this spot. Over 40 fights into your professional career, earning your first decision victory. This is going to be a blood and guts fight. Pineda has the potential to take this fight to the mat and lock up a submission. I think that is a possibility here. I also think that we have Andre Fili, who is going to try to stay evasive. Team Alpha Male trained fighter. Going to look to extend Pineda and make him gas out. And the longer this fight goes, I see Pineda, the wheels starting to fall off, and Andre Fili picking Pineda apart at range. Fili has a big reach advantage here. Pineda knows he's a finisher. You watch after the weigh-ins, he did an interview and said that, he's going to finish Fili. Well, we'll see. I don't think this fight is going the distance. I'll be picking Fili But Pineda is a live fighter. If he has success grappling early, he could win the first round, and then the wheels have a tendency to fall off. And I don't see things changing as he has become an elder statesman in the fight game. Pineda now 35 years old. He's not a spring chicken, and he goes balls to the wall. So give me Andre Fili in that fight. Now, here we are. This is the people's main event where we have Raoni Barcelos, 16-1 record. He's over a minus 200 favorite. He's a minus 215 favorite with a DraftKings price of 8,800, taking on Timur Valiev. Timur Valiev, 17-2 plus 175 underdog with a DraftKings price of 7,400. I love this weight class. 135 pounds. I would have much rather preferred Raoni Barcelos take on Frankie Edgar in this spot. Timur Valiev is a live dog here. I don't necessarily understand why folks are emptying their wallets on Barcelos in this spot. Barcelos, he is a very well-rounded fighter. He does it all with cruel intentions, has a great gas tank, has leg kicks. He reminds me, I mean, just about everything you could say about Jose Aldo, you can say about Raoni Barcelos. Though at this stage in his career, Barcelos hasn't faced the level of competition that one would expect. This is Barcelos' stiffest test, and Valiev, we saw a couple of fights ago, he was dominating until he gassed himself out in what should have been a stoppage victory for Valiev, but got caught. Valiev, a extremely well-rounded fighter, was, I believe, the first fighter to the scales at the weigh-ins and looked in phenomenal shape. This fight could turn into a war of attrition. Barcelos, the Said Nurmagomedov bout, we saw that was a tough puzzle to solve, and he was able to do that. Valiev, though, I really think this is going to be a very close fight. I don't see value in minus 215 on Barcelos. It's going to be a high action fight. Valiev, I don't see him getting stuck on bottom for significant lengths of time. I think that this is going to be a war. And Barcelos, granted, does have the better durability. And that's where I think that is going to be a difference maker the longer this fight goes. If you ask me to make a pick, I'm going to pick Barcelos. But Valiev has so many tricks up his sleeve. Comes from great camp. Does everything right. And the way he's taken losses, especially 2 fights ago, that fight should have been stopped in my eyes. All right. Let's continue here. Let's continue here where we have the co-main event of the evening. We are 28 minutes into this breakdown. We have 2 fights to go, and we are going to highlight a bout that was put together on relatively short notice where we have OSP, who is originally supposed to fight Maxime Grishin, now moves up to heavyweight. Granted, there's only a 10-pound difference when these fighters weighed in. We have OSP coming in with a 25-15 overall record. Slight underdog, plus 145 dog, and a DraftKings price of 7,900. We know OSP is well-rounded. Just when you think you've got him out of there, he can love his patented Von Flue choke. Taking on Tanner Boser, who's extremely frustrated. Granted, got a new UFC contract recently. His back is still up against the wall. 19-8-1 record, a high volume heavyweight, minus 175 favorite, DraftKings price of 8,300. This fight takes place at heavyweight. You had Tanner coming in at 240 pounds. You had OSP coming in at 230. OSP, you watch his last few fights, the Jamal Hill fight and others, he has about a round and a half of gas, and then the wheels start to fall off. I know the Menafield fight, he was able to land a punch there and drop an ice Alonzo Menafield. Boser is going to be a moving target, and OSP does not have the movement, especially at heavyweight, to cause Boser real problems. He's going to have to take some damage early, and then while Boser's closing distance, try to get a hold of him and drag Boser to the ground, where we've seen holes in Tanner Boser's ground game. He hasn't shown an ability to get back to his feet. There is the possibility that OSP locks up a submission here and uses his, granted, he doesn't have a size advantage here, but I think when it comes down to it, he will have a strength advantage here. OSP has some issues with getting behind on the metrics when it comes to punches thrown versus punches landed and punches absorbed. OSP is one of those fighters where he's actually eating more damage than he's dishing out, and this is starting to add up. This is a fighter who now is 38 years old. The gas tank, I think, is going to be an issue here. And Tanner Boser is only a few weeks removed from a frustrating loss to Ilir Latifi, who traditionally has fought at light heavyweight. Granted, was in there against Derek Lewis and didn't get finished. But then you look at Boser in his fight against Ciryl Gane. Evasive, stuck a move. Granted, took a big loss in that fight. But I'll be picking Tanner Boser in this spot. I think that Boser, as long as he's able to stay evasive, that should cause OSP some big problems. OSP has a reach advantage here. We'll be looking to land at range. Could be coming out looking for body kicks. Can't trust OSP to come out and grapple, but that Tyson Pedro fight, that's another one where OSP was getting lit up and then turned the tide. The Corey Anderson fight, getting lit up, then landed that big head kick. It's hard to put stock in a puncher's chance, and well, he also has a chance at the Von Flue choke. But I'll be picking Tanner Boser here. I think that he has a couple of paths to victory here, and volume striking based decision is high on the list. So that's going to be my pick. Last fight, main event of the evening, where we have Ciryl Gane, still green when it comes to mixed martial arts records go, 8-0 record, but hasn't looked green inside of the octagon. -150 favorite and an 8,700 DraftKings price, taking on an Alexander Volkov, who is coming in with a 33-8 overall record, +120 underdog, and a DraftKings price of 7,500. This fight, I'll say this fight is going to answer a lot of questions. Ciryl Gane, the way he solved Jair Rosenstruck's puzzle was very impressive to me. It was a fight where he was up against a dangerous counter striker, and he got in and got out, used incredible footwork. Alexander Volkov has packed on some weight, has impressed me recently. A few fights ago, his stock was very low coming off of the Curtis Blades bout. He doesn't have to worry about getting taken down repeatedly as Curtis Blades did for 5 rounds. This fight, what makes this fight interesting is, number one, it's inside of the smaller octagon. Number two, Alexander Volkov is massive and throws for volume. And Gane is going to have a Volkov in his face for 25 minutes potentially. Volkov isn't a counter striker. He's going to look in there to set a pace, implement his will, possibly get his grappling going. Gane, though, from what we've seen, hasn't looked like a fish out of water on the ground, and it hasn't caused him big problems yet. Oh, man. This fight's really interesting. Gane is the much faster fighter. I do think, although people have referred to Gane as having pillow hands, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that he could potentially pose Volkov some problems. Volkov has been finished in the past via strikes and also has shown some issues on the ground. The lean here is going to be Ciryl Gane. I think that I understand folks being on the Volkov side of things, that he's the much more established fighter, that he's going to make Gane pay whenever Gane tries to close the distance. He's got a solid kicking game as well, and Gane isn't necessarily a threat when this fight hits the mat. So this fight should stay upright. But Gane's evasiveness and the way he's been able to slip punches and be the much quicker fighter, I think that is going to be a difference maker down the stretch. We have Mani saying Boser won against opponents with one step outside the cage. Yes, I agree. Well, what would you say about OSP, who's now 38 years of age, who's moving up to heavyweight and has slowed down recently? So that's an interesting spot. I do agree with you. That's an interesting spot for Boser and OSP. All right, let's see. So back to the main event of the evening, where Gane, he's going to be my pick in this spot. I believe that this is a fight where we will have some more answers, but I wouldn't be running to the betting window for either fighter in this spot. I think that this is one of those fights where you sit back and you have a nice fresh cup of coffee, and unless you're playing DraftKings, then you do have to pick a side. And I see value in Volkov at only 7,500. That's the value play, but I'm going to be picking Gane to win. I think that he is going to shine here and catapult himself up the rankings. Francis Ngannou against Ciryl Gane. Can you imagine that? Sparring partners. Interesting how that would play out. I want to wish everybody a tremendous fight morning. I have 4 plays listed up at betmma.tips and MMA Oddsbreaker Premium. MMA Oddsbreaker Premium. We've got a bunch of action over there. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank MMA Oddsbreaker for hosting the podcast, as well as our friends over at BetDSI. Remember, go get what's yours. Third-party tracked. Take care, and let's do this, my friends. Fights start at 1 o'clock. Get ready.